All right, so all that to say, I have a love of naval aviation. So much so that when I joined the Navy, I became a hospital corpsman. I was looking for something that was going to be that I thought would be exciting, but would also be probably something in my wheelhouse. And then I looked at psychiatric technician, and I became a psychiatric technician as a corpsman. Where corpsmen are different from medics, and now a medic is in the Army or the Air Force. We don't have medics in the Navy and the Marine Corps. We have hospital corpsmen. Hospital corpsmen go through 14 weeks of training that we learn nursing care, we learn emergency first aid, we learn all kinds of things. We learn administration, we learn how to write soap notes, and I'll tell you what a soap note is sometime in the future. But we learn all of these other things that they don't necessarily do in the Army or the Marine or the Air Force unless you choose that specific MOS. So in the Navy, you become a corpsman first, what we call a quad zero corpsman. Our designation is HM, stands for hospital corpsman, 0000. So we call that an HM quad zero. So after you graduate, that's what you are when you graduate from hospital corps school. Now, if you choose something beyond that, like you want to choose to specialize in something, in my case, my first choice was psychiatry. So I wanted to be a psychiatric technician because I was a psychology major for the half a semester I was in college. And I chose that, and then after I graduated from psych school, I became an HM 8485. Okay? In the Navy or in the Marine Corps and in the Army, they call those MOSs, and I can't remember what they call it in the Air Force. But so I did 4 years of psychiatry, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I hated being in the Naval Hospital. They showed me this, I saw this job that I could transfer over to, and it was called aerospace physiology technician. But in order to become an aerospace physiology technician, I had to become an aerospace medical technician first. And so, but I was a little heavy, and I couldn't do ejection seats because I was a little heavy. And so I chose to go ahead and take aviation med tech to start with, and then see if I could get into aviation physiology tech later. So I was able to get into it. I got into aviation medical technician school, and I had all these plans I had lost a bunch of weight. I was planning on going into applying for aerospace physiology technician right after that. And then I got orders. They gave me orders to a squadron called HS-15, Helicopter Anti-Submarine Squadron 15. And I was like, oh, this possibly could be the game changer. This sounds exciting. This sounds intriguing. It sounds adventurous. And so I said, that's what I think I'm going to do. Talked with my wife. We had 2 kids at the time. And I said, you know what? I really want to do this. I really want to do this. She's like, well, all right, if you want to. So I did. And who would have thought I was going to be at sea for a little over a year. But that's what I was. I didn't, not consecutively. But so I chose to go aviation. And I never looked back. And after I finished my first tour at HS-15, I switched over to aerospace physiology technician. I got to do that for the next 7 years. And not 7 years? Next 7 years. I did 4 years in Pensacola and then another 3 years in Cherry Point, North Carolina. And I loved it. I loved teaching. And I was an instructor. I got up and I taught about survival systems, aviation survival systems, and altitude threats. And we did device training. I was an inside observer on a low pressure chamber. I was the chief observer in a low pressure chamber. I was the chief observer for an ejection seat simulator. I did all these really cool things. And I really, really enjoyed it. And then I realized I'm never going to become a chief petty officer if I stay in this. And so eventually I went back to being an aviation medical technician, and then I went with the Marine Corps for three and a half years. So what we're going to do is we're going to understand the background of U.S. Navy aviation and learn about Navy aircraft in use today. All right, so today we're going to explain the background of naval aviation. All right, so here we go. Let's practice our thumb pressing skills here. A floating structure such as the float on a seaplane. Let's see how many people. Probably after we get about 10 of you, I'll go ahead and give you the answer. We'll move on. So, all right, it's called a pontoon. Floating structure. Anybody see like a pontoon boat? Like a party barge? Yeah, those are fun. All right. A general term for an armed naval vessel. General term for an armed naval vessel. I bet you can't get it. A general term. All right, it's a man of war. Man of war is the correct answer. And that is not a sexist term, by the way. All right, that term has been around for hundreds of years. They've called fighting ships men of war for centuries and centuries. Okay, so and when we usually talk about a ship, we usually speak about it in female terms. We'll say, her name is the USS Saratoga, or her name is the Enterprise. But when we talk about a fighting ship particularly, we call it a man of war. Okay? An unmanned aircraft or ship guided by remote control. Most of you heard these terms before. All right, that answer is a drone. All right. And the interesting thing is if it's guided by remote control, it's technically an unmanned aerial vehicle. A drone, the Navy is the only service that has a true drone. It was called the X-47, and or the AX-47, something like that. But anyway, what they did was they programmed its destination. They launched the thing. It flew to its destination on its own, without anybody controlling it. Flew on its own, dropped its bombs or dropped its ordnance or whatever it did. Flew back and landed on the ship by itself. All right, that's a drone. That's a real drone. But we call like remotely operated vehicles drones now too. So anyway, anybody here ever see the movie Stealth? No, I can only remember Jessica Biel being in it. Oh, and Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx was in it too. Huh? Jamie Foxx is in it too. Yeah, he was one of the Navy pilots. So anyway, but in that one, they had a true drone. So. All right, an alteration or adjustment as of an aircraft or other vehicle. I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys what this is. Alteration of adjustment or adjustment as of an aircraft or other vehicle. It's a modification. Good. So some of you got it. All right, so pontoon floating structure such as a floater on a seaplane, man of war, a general term for an unarmed vessel, drone, an unmanned aircraft or ship guided by remote control, modification, and alteration or adjustment as of an aircraft or another vehicle. All right. All right. 2 to 3 ways that aircraft carriers support warfare. Somebody raise your hand and tell me. What's a way that an aircraft carrier supports warfare? Yes, ma'am.
Maybe it like take supplies out to the stuff like.
Okay, they can do logistical drops, usually with helicopters when they do that type of thing. Anybody else got any other guesses? Tell me, Albert. Oh yeah, they carry jets. That's right. They carry jets, and the jets are our primary tactical weapon. They're our primary offensive weapon. So these aircraft can do anti-submarine warfare. They can still do drug interdiction. They can do humanitarian missions. They can do all kinds of stuff. All right. Anybody like flying? Who here has flown before?
On a plane?
Flown on an airplane? Yes. I would not expect you to grow feathers. Huh?
I've been in a helicopter.
Helicopters count. That's an aircraft. Good. A few of you have. Good. Okay, go ahead and answer the question. All right. Do you like flying? Extremely, a lot, somewhat, not really, not at all.
I can't text on this.
Oh, you don't have to text. You just put A, B, C, D, or E.
No, I'm talking about like on the plane.
Oh, you can't text on a plane?
Yeah, unless
If I
you like,
want
well,
one.
yeah.
Is that if that's a criteria for whether you enjoy being on a plane?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Because.
Oh my gosh.
I don't like
You
heights.
guys would die if you grew up in, well, actually, I can't say you would die because you wouldn't know any better. You wouldn't know that. We didn't have email until the 1990s. We didn't have email until the 1990s. My first deployment in 1994, you know what kind of communication we had with home? Letters. Snail mail. Like real envelopes with real letters that you write on, you know?
Really?
And the other thing of it is that there's no digitized perfume on those things, but there is on a letter. And so what happened? I get those things and be like, myself's writing to me again. All right? And she would number them all. She would number them all because they would arrive out of sequence. All right? So, but how did those, and all that to say, how did that snail mail get to me on the ship, on the USS Saratoga? By aircraft. We'll talk about that. All right. What do you think a dirigible is? You got to guess this. There's a picture of it.
Oh.
There's a picture of it.
Wait.
You know, some people do it wrong.
Y'all are killing me.
It's a ball.
Here we go. What, somebody raise your hand and tell me what it is.
It's a blimp.
It's a blimp. All right.
Who's
Now,
a plane that can take off?
back
like
in
a
the day,
helicopter?
there were different types of blimps. There were rigid dirigibles, such as the Hindenburg and the Graf Zeppelin, back in the 30s. But then there was blimps, and the blimps are just big. They have big inflatable ladders. And they like a Goodyear blimp.
Like the Lorax, remember? And they had the words going across it. Is that what that is?
Yes, not that picture, but that's an old picture. But all right, Eugene Ellie. I'm not going to call him Eli. Eli is E-L-Y, but Eugene Ellie accomplished 2 significant milestones in naval aviation. He flew off of a ship and he landed on a ship. He was the first pilot to complete a takeoff from a ship on November 1910, and he was the first pilot to successfully land an aircraft on the deck of a ship in January 1911. All right, 4 months away, he set 2 new records. The Navy attempted to combine aircraft with the fleet with 4 distinct approaches in the first era of naval aviation. All right, we have propeller-driven combat planes. They took off from small, early aircraft carriers. This aircraft carrier, this is the first aircraft carrier. This was the USS Langley. CV, what does CV stand for? Aircraft carrier. This is CV1. CV1. And now we're all the way up to like CVN 78. So, all right, we also have flying boats. They flew anti-submarine warfare, not welfare, but warfare patrols. All right, this is a Catalina PBY. Okay. The Navy attempted to combine aircraft with the fleet with 4 distinct. Okay, we've also got lighter than aircraft, such as dirigibles, which are rigid frame, and blimps, which have no solid frame. Then we have pontoon planes operated from ships other than aircraft carriers, operated from men of war, such as battleships. If you ever go to see the USS North Carolina up in Wilmington, or you see the USS Alabama, they're not USS ships anymore because they've been decommissioned, but the Alabama down in Mobile Bay, Alabama, you will see that they've got a biplane, doesn't look exactly like this, this is even older than that, but they have a biplane on pontoons on a steam-powered catapult. No, a hydraulic-powered catapult. The second era of naval aviation followed with jet aircraft, aircraft carriers, helicopters, and long-range patrol planes. Now these do not launch and land on aircraft carriers. They just don't. They're too big. All right? And they don't have arresting gear and things like that. But these, you see all these things underneath here? Those are all depth charges. Those are depth charges. They're not like the drums they're not like ship-launched depth charges. All right. First aircraft carrier is the USS Langley. It's commissioned 20 March 1922. It was originally a collier. Now, a collier is a coal ship. So, I mean, ships today, if they are not nuclear powered, or even if they're nuclear powered, they still got to get some kind of fuel. All right, they got to get some kind of, like, if it's an aircraft carrier, they've got to get jet fuel. So anyway, they'll get liquid jet fuel from there, but we'll get it from an oiler. Or if you've got a conventional ship, such as a small boy, like a cruiser or a destroyer or a frigate, they still have to be gassed up too. So they'll pull alongside an oiler or a USS Supply class ship, and they'll get fuel. But back in the day, we didn't have liquid fuel. We didn't have diesel fuel, and we had diesel fuel, but we didn't use it for what we use it for today. We didn't have jet fuel we had to transfer. Everything was coal powered. And so a collier carried coal to power other ships. And the interesting thing is that they couldn't do underway replenishment. We didn't perfect underway replenishment until World War II. So, all right, followed by the USS Lexington, which is CV2, and USS Saratoga, which is CV3. Now, when I talk about the USS Saratoga, I was not on CV3. CV3 got sunk during World War II. All right, and then there was a second Saratoga which got sunk during World War II. Actually, after World War II, it was used as a target for an atomic bomb. All right, and then previously commissioned as cruisers, but were approved to change to aircraft carriers in 1927. All right, this is kind of interesting.
The scaled-down American Navy began experimenting with a radical new idea, the aircraft carrier. An old coal ship, the Langley, was fitted out with a flat deck, and daring aviators risked their necks, taking off and landing on it.
All right. In World War II, air power became key to strategy and execution. Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on 7 December 1941 showed the effectiveness of long-range carrier-based airstrikes. That was the first time a carrier-launched airstrike ever took place was when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. In the Battle of Coral Sea on May 1942, aircraft launched from carriers in an engagement where U.S. and Japanese fleets never saw each other. The ships never saw each other. They would launch airplanes, and those airplanes would attack the other ships, and then they would return to their carriers. All right, what was the name of the first U.S. aircraft carrier? First U.S. aircraft carrier. Answer the question. All right, let's see how we got. The USS Langley. Some folks paid attention. USS Ronald Reagan is like CVN 78 or CVN 77, something like that. So it's much later. USS Alabama is a submarine. Used to be a battleship. USS Alaska is a submarine. All right. Following events in the correct order. Okay? You guys, yeah, you can plug it in. I'm going to go ahead and hit it here in just a second. So the first thing is the Wright brothers make their first flight. So that's A. The second thing is the first aircraft carrier was invented. The third thing was helicopters were used for rescue and patrol, because helicopters didn't come around until after World War II. And the last thing, stealth aircraft used in war in Iraq. Stealth aircraft are a special breed. All right. A, C, B, D. All right. In the early years of naval aviation, lighter-than aircraft were used for scouting missions. Today, helicopters are used for scouting as well as rescue and patrol. Modern naval aircraft are divided into two general categories. We divide them into fixed wing and rotary wing. Rotary wing means that the wings spin round and round. Anybody ever see a rotary engine? Anybody ever heard of you know how we have piston engines in our cars and stuff?
Yeah.
Well, Mazda was the first, and as far as I know, the only car company that has ever used rotary engines. It's called a Wankel rotary engine. And they call them, and instead of calling them pistons, they call them rotors. And they use a lot of oil. But anyway. All right, fixed wing and rotary wing. Three important developments in aircraft carriers after World War II. We have the angled flight deck in 1952, which allows a carrier to launch and recover aircraft at the same time. We have the steam catapult in 1954, which can propel a 60,000-pound aircraft to a speed of 150 miles an hour in 2 seconds. Imagine that. 150 miles per hour in 2 seconds. Now, usually we have, like in cars, we have a 0 to 60 speed. 0 to 60 in, say, 3 seconds. That's pretty freaking fast, you know? The closest thing that's gotten 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds is like a Tesla electric vehicle, because those things will break your neck. It can accelerate so fast. All right, nuclear power in 1961, which allowed carriers to accommodate more planes and larger crews, stay at sea longer, and steam at 30 knots for extended periods. See this thing right here? That was my second ship. That's the USS Enterprise.
E equals mc squared.
Yeah, it's precious. This next one to it, though, is a cruiser. I don't know which cruiser this is, but it's one of the first nuclear-powered cruisers. We have 4 nuclear-powered cruisers: California, Texas, the North Carolina, and I can't remember what the 4th one was. Fixed-wing aircraft missions, they strike, and by the way, all those cruisers are decommissioned. We don't have them anymore. Fixed-wing aircraft missions strike against an enemy, protect the fleet from enemy aircraft and surface ships, perform undersea warfare, photography, and escort, and perform reconnaissance and early warning. Rotary wing aircraft missions, amphibious operations. In other words, they'll take troops from the sea to the land. Vertical replenishment. So we'll also call that VERTREP. You remember me telling you about underway replenishment or UNREP? Remember I tell you, we would pull up to them and then we'd hang the hoses in between us, and then the helicopters would be moving groceries from deck to deck. Okay, the helicopter movement is called VERTREP, vertical replenishment. Search and rescue, that goes without saying. Mine sweeping. We actually use helicopters in mine sweeping too. We have this big sled, this big CH-53 or MH-53 ginormous helicopter, and it's got this sled. They'll come down to the water and they'll drop the sled out of the back of it, and then they'll tow it. And it'll make all kinds of racket and stuff like that to try and set off mines. And it also has sonar and stuff like that to find mines. Undersea warfare, because we can do anti-submarine warfare with the helicopter, and special warfare, SEAL delivery. Following types of missions would be most likely flown by what kind of aircraft? Search and rescue, amphibious operations, and mine sweeping. What kind of aircraft would do that? Say it with your thumbs, not with your lips. Pay attention, this is an easy question, right? All right, Roger, what is it?
Rotary wing.
Rotary wing, that's right. Good. All right. Which of the following are fixed wing aircraft? Picture time. A or B? A or B? Super easy. The correct answer is? Somebody besides Roger, raise your hand and tell me. LeFevre. A. Fixed wing. The wings are fixed. They don't spin around and around. So, all right. There we go. All right. Tri-service designation means that a given model of plane has the same code whether used in the Navy, Army, or Air Force. I'll give you an example. Okay. Anybody here heard of the F-35? The F-35 Lightning II is the name of it. F-35 Lightning II. Well, there are 3 different variants of that. There is the F-35A, the F-35B, and the F-35C. The F-35A, right now keep in mind, these are all F-35s, Lightning IIs. The F-35A is for the Air Force. It doesn't have a very big wingspan, but it's just a standard configuration designed to take off and land on the land, okay? And then there's the F-35B, which is the Marine Corps variant. The Marine Corps variant is really cool because it can actually do short takeoff and vertical landing. It takes off like this, and then it lands like this, like a helicopter, vertically. And then the F-35C is the Navy variant. It has a wider wingspan. In other words, its wings are longer. And it has beefier landing gear and a tail hook that's beefier too. And it's designed to be slammed onto flight decks and stopped by an arresting cable and things like that. Naval aircraft have to be much more robustly built because of the amount of stress that they take during takeoff and landing. All right, so the basic designation format, we got one letter, a number, and then an optional A, B, or C. When I talk about the F-35, what is that one letter? What's the one letter? Out of what I said, F-35, A, B, or C? F, all right? The F stands for fighter, all right? And then the 35 is its model designation, all right? And then its modification is A, B, or C, right? It has nothing to do with attack bomber or anything like that. Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with that. The A, B, or C is its modification. So when we talk about the F-35, we're talking about the A, B, or C is 3 different modifications, right? Y'all pick up what I'm putting down?
Yes.
All right. The A was for what service?
Air
Force.
Air Force. The B was for what service?
Marine
The Marines, and the C was for the
Navy.
All right, think you're getting it. All right, so an example of this would be like the F-14 Tomcat, which doesn't exist anymore. Well, is no longer in commission. They're on sticks now. But the F-14, all right, the F is a fighter, 14 is its model designation, all right? We also have something called an F/A-18 Hornet. Now that's interesting, F/A-18. So instead of one letter, like F, we have F/A. So what does that sound like?
Fighter attack.
Fighter attack. It's what we call a strike fighter. So it's a fighter that can also double as a bomber. Okay? So we have the F/A-18, but we've also got different levels, modifications of the F/A-18. All right. Like for instance, we have got the F/A-18A, which is a single-seater, the F/A-18B, which is a two-seater, the F/A-18C, which is an improvement over the F/A-18A and B, and then the F/A-18D, which is the C, but with 2 seats. But wait, there's more. Then there's the F/A-18E, which is longer, it has more weapon sponsons, a broader wingspan, and geometric engine intakes. And then there's the F/A-18F, which is the E, but with just 2 seats. Y'all pick up what I'm putting down?
No.
All right, now I'm going to blow your minds. Now I'm going to blow your minds, all right? So now we've got a model. We've got a model of the 18 that is not an F/A-18. What? It's an electronic warfare aircraft. It's called the EA-18. But it's a modification of the 18 airframe. So it's the EA-18G, because we've already had the F/A-18A, the F/A-18B, the F/A-18C, the F/A-18D, the F/A-18E, the F/A-18F, but now we've got the EA-18G, all right? And that's an electronic warfare
That sounds
aircraft.
complicated.
It does sound confusing, but it's such a good aircraft that they just decided they were going to keep on with it. So, all right. So that explains that. So the aircraft model designations. So attack, C is cargo transport. So we have a C2 Greyhound, which is a cargo plane. Director for drones. E, the E in A-18G. Remember what I was telling you about that one? The E stands for electronic warfare. It replaced the EA-6B, which was an electronic warfare plane. You guys are going to see all these things tomorrow too when I show you the new slideshow. Okay? All right, H is helicopter, search and rescue. Tanker is a K. So we used to have a KC-130, which is a cargo plane converted for tanker. We have KC, those are Marine Corps aircraft. So I think you get my point. I was when I was in HS-15, we flew SH-60 Fs, okay? SH, the S stood for anti-submarine. The H stood for helicopter. The 60 was its airframe designation, so it was a helicopter. It was 60. And then it was a Foxtrot, SH-60 Foxtrot, which was the F modification of the H-60. All right, moving along. Okay, so this one's interesting. G, permanently grounded. Do you know that we have GF-14s? There's one on a stick out in front of the National Museum of Naval Aviation. All right, it's a GF-14. Means it's permanently grounded. It's mounted on a stick. It's not going anywhere. And then also too in the over in Havelock, North Carolina, there's a Harrier that's on a stick called the Harrier on a stick. Is what we always called it. And it is a GA-8B Harrier. All right, a B-17 is a what, and the 17 is what? What's B stand for?
Bomber.
Bomber, yeah. And there's it down to 2, doesn't it? Now the numbers are ticking by. There we go. All right, what's the answer? D. All right, it's a bomber, and the 17 was that design of that plane. All right, when a plane has a what designation, this means that it is a prototype used for design testing. Maybe you looked, maybe you didn't. Want to guess? When they built the prototype of the F-35 A, B, and C, it was the YF-35. What does that tell you? Oh, Micaiah, I'm late. I gotta send you to the office, to the guy. Hey, go ahead and take your stuff, Micaiah. Just give me your clicker one. All right, let's get back with it. What's the answer? The answer's Y. It's C, yes. Okay, good. All right. What was significant about the Battle of Coral Sea? The Battle of Coral Sea. What was significant about it? Yes, Lucero. That's exactly right. They only used aircraft for attack. They didn't shoot guns at each other like in the old naval battles. So, all right. Y'all got any questions about anything?
That was confusing.
Was it clear as mud? Yes, sir. What's your question?
Have you ever ridden in a blimp before?
Ridden in a blimp before? I never have. No. No. The Navy has had blimps as experimental aircraft since they've quit using them, but now we never found another use for blimps anymore. They used to use them for patrol, and they actually were given USS designations like a ship would have. Yeah, y'all can answer my phone. It's hung up now. It's probably guidance wondering where Micaiah was. So, yeah. So anyway, all right. Any other questions?
No.
Y'all don't want to hear anything about like what I did in the Navy as far as like
No.
the aircraft and the aircraft that I've seen or the aircraft I've flown on or anything like that? Y'all know I've had a catapult shot? I've been shot off the edge of a flight deck. I have. I was in a C-2 Greyhound. I'm telling you, I have got stuff to tell you. All you got to know is all you got to do is ask me. But I've got more stuff stuck in this brain housing unit that it has to be triggered. It has to be triggered by questions. But I got all kinds of great stories. Yes, Dakari. I've been in a few, yeah, but not on an air, but not in the Navy. So, anybody else?
How many ships have you been on?
I have actually been at sea on 2 ships: USS Saratoga, CV-60, and USS Enterprise, CVN-65. Yep. Yes, sir.
Have you ever slept in while on a ship?
Slept in what?
Slept in while you were on a ship?
Slept in while I was on a ship?
Yes, sir.
I have. I have slept in on a ship, but it wasn't at sea. It was when we were in port, and I was on Liberty. And when I was on Liberty, it means I could sleep in as long as I wanted to. So, but yeah. But sleeping on a ship, that's some of the best sleep you'll ever get. So, because all of the bunks are fore and aft, and it just kind of rocks you to sleep. That's nice. Anybody else? No. I love my sleep. Yeah.
What was the name of the plane that shot you off?
Called a C-2 Greyhound. And it's also known as a COD, Carrier Onboard Delivery. Yes, ma'am.
Why would you shout off? Like, why?
I wanted to go back to the beach early. And so to go back to the shore early. And they were done with me. They didn't need me for anything. I made all kinds of arrangements. I was towards the end of my tour. I had the opportunity to actually fly on an E6, on an E6, E3, I'm sorry, an S3 Viking, not an E, but an S3 Viking, which is an ejection seat aircraft. I would have gotten launched, we would have flown a patrol, and we would come back and landed in the landing area. Well, my air crewman who maintained my training jacket left my training jacket back at the beach. So back in Garrison, so I had nothing to prove to VS-30 that I had all of the requisite training to get launched to fly in their aircraft. And I was devastated because it was the only chance I was going to get to fly in a tactical aircraft in an ejection seat off the end of a carrier and land on the other end. And so I was just like, you know what, screw this. I just want to go. I want to go home. This is my last at sea period. And I said, I want to shot off as an aircraft carrier. And so I did all the planning, and my administration and my ops department said, okay, you can. And it was the craziest thing. All right, so y'all want to hear about it? All right, so in a COD, there's no windows. There's a couple windows towards the rear, but you can't see out of them. There's 20 seats. They're 4 across, and they're in the back of this thing. And then at the very back of it is where they'll put the cargo. So we're in this thing, and all the seats face to the rear. So what you do when you get ready to launch, you sit down in the seat. You got a float coat on. You got a helmet on with what we call Mickey Mouse ears. It's hearing attenuation. And you got goggles. You don't have to wear them inside. But then you have a 4-point harness for your shoulders and for your waist. And you cross your arms across there, and you kind of just drape your head. All right. And so what will happen is you'll hear this because they're propellers. And then what will happen is they'll pull up to the catapult, and you'll hear some clackety clack and everything of them connecting it to the catapult, and then you'll hear this. That's when it goes into tension, and you'll feel it kind of lurch a little bit, and then you'll hear this, and then thunk. You'll hear this loud thunk, and then what will happen is your head will come back like that, and you're like, what in the world? Did we stop suddenly? And then you start feeling the airplane moving. You're like, we're airborne now. So it's complete sensory deprivation. You can't see, you can hear, you get cues from your hearing, and your body feels things. So you feel your head going aft when you launch, but then when you reach the end of the catapult stroke, then the acceleration, the hard acceleration is over. And then which causes you to lurch back into your seat. And then you're airborne at that point. And you'll hear the landing gear retract and everything. It's pretty crazy stuff. So at least I can say I got launched off the aircraft. I didn't get to land on one. I would love to try it. So. Any other questions? I did get to fly in a helicopter at sea too, a few times actually, a few times, and that's fun because you can see in the water. You're flying over there and you can see like schools of sharks. You can see pods of dolphins, pods of whales. You can see all of that stuff. It's pretty darn cool. And of course, we're sitting there, we're sitting outside of sitting in the door of the helicopter with our feet hanging out the side. The only thing holding you into the helicopter is a gunner's belt. And and you're thinking, oh, well, that's okay, until you make a turn. When you turn, the helicopter banks. Okay, it actually rolls a little bit to turn. Well, if it turns to the right, you're looking at the water.
Oh, God.
You're looking at the water. I mean, you feel it in the seat of your pants. You feel the pressure in the seat of your pants. You're not gonna roll forward or anything, but because the centrifugal force is holding your bum to the deck of the helicopter. But it's awful fun.
I still wouldn't ride in it.
Oh, dude, it's so much fun. There's so much to see. It's funny. I have a little bit of a fear of heights off of stationary things, man-made objects. Like for instance, if I go up to the top of a lighthouse, it'll give me the
I've never
heebie-jeebies.
been on it.
Yeah, it'll give me the heebie-jeebies. I've been on top of a couple of lighthouses. In a helicopter, completely different story. I have no fear of heights. Or if I'm in an aircraft, I have no fear of heights. I have flown on countless aircraft. Oh my gosh. More civilian aircraft than I can count. But then I've also flown in an H-1. So remember, H stands for what?
Helicopter.
Helicopter. I've flown in an H-1, an H-3, an H-46, an H-60, and H-53. Flown in all 5 of those aircraft. Okay? Helicopters. That's just helicopters. Now, I've flown in a C-130, a C-17, a C-9, C-2. I can't remember what else. I've flown in a few of them. And then civilian aircraft, I've flown in 727, 737. I've not flown in a 747. Not many people can say that they have. 757, 767, 777, and a 787 I flew
Those are
on
them big
a few
planes.
years ago when I flew to Korea. So 787. I've flown on a DC-9, a DC-10, an L-1011, that's a Lockheed version, wide body version of like a 727, not 727. It was a mess aircraft. I've flown all over the place. Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how loud was that catapult?
I'd say, because I had a hearing attenuation on, I'd say it was probably about 7. So if I had taken it off, it would have been like overwhelmingly loud. But it's funny too, because on the aircraft carrier, when they launch aircraft, you'll hear this, and then you'll hear, and then when it starts the catapult launch roll, it'll go, and you'll hear this, boom, and you'll feel the whole ship shudder. And it's because the catapult shuttle hits the water brake, and it sends the shudder through the rest of the ship. It's pretty crazy. And then when they come in for a landing, you don't really feel it at all, but you'll hear the airplane, and you'll hear this, bam! It's this really loud screech and whine, and it's of the wire being pulled through the hydraulic engines that slow the aircraft down. So it's pretty cool. Anything else? Come up with any other questions, let me know. I'll be happy to answer them.